on the novel that I have been, and I know that it's ebb and flow. I know it's cyclical, and now I'm at the high point because I'm like, oh man, then this could happen and this could happen, and then you can't write fast enough because you're excited about getting to those points. So
yeah,
I'm hoping that I catch that same excitement from you as you fill me in on progress as it goes along.
It'll happen for sure. You know me, I love to talk, and I love to share, right? So I'm okay doing that with you because I know that you'll only make a little fun of me, and that'll be the end of it. But I do like to share things that are in progress. In fact, when I was younger, I would overshare things that were in progress, and it would create an opportunity for somebody to say just very instantly, I don't really get this. And then that would be enough to go, oh God, I'm terrible. And that particular story would literally burst into flames in my hand.
Oh, yeah.
Like it would just be done. So I've learned now that I'm a wiser, older man, maybe don't do that. So yeah, I like to talk about the things like the themes and the motifs and the symbols and whatnot as they kind of crop up. And that's actually what we're going to be talking about today is theme and sort of what it is, how it works, and if you have to do it,
Well, I hope you don't have to, because I'm certainly not. I'm like, I think I'm at 23,000 words. I just wrote another 600 today. Not very good, but I was eating a bagel at the time, so give me a break. That's 400 words right there.
Those are bagel words.
Yeah, I'm up here in central New York. There's a really great coffee shop we have in the area, and whenever I can get up here, it's called Wakeman Coffee Company, and I just love it because it's very cardiologist unfriendly butter that they use, probably locally sourced. And so I'm just like, I'm in heaven, just like, I'm excited to work on my Oh, well, that's a lot of butter you put on there. Thank you very much. Where was I? Yeah. So, but yeah, I'm 23,000 words into it, and I'm sort of like, oh, it's just exciting. It's exciting.
I'm excited for you. And when you sent me the word count, I was like, yeah, get it. I was really excited to see it because you're into that journey. And I mean, who knows how many of those you're going to keep in the final, but that's absolutely, the substrate that you need to use to get the road paved. So I'm very excited about your progress, and I really kind of want to read some of it. I promise you that I will not give you any feedback. Because I don't want your manuscript to burst into flames, but I really would love a sneak peek if you're willing.
Yeah, and I think I have the same thing. If somebody read a piece and it wasn't very early on in my writing career, way long ago, and especially in that time, we've talked about before, that sort of void time for like 15, 20 years where I wasn't writing because I just didn't have that confidence. Back in the day, same thing would happen to me. Manuscript, whatever I was working on would burst into flames. But then in that time when I wasn't doing a lot of writing, when I didn't have that confidence, I used it as an excuse. If someone was like, I don't really get what you're going for here, then I could be like, I knew it. Well, forget it. And that would be the excuse to not do the work of editing and writing and try to make it into something that someone could understand.
Yeah. So
right now, I definitely feel like, I think I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I've got it figured out. And, we've never done that on this show. I'm not Cormac McCarthy. I'm not Toni Morrison. I'm not anybody. I'm not even the guy that writes for the Penny Saver in Walla Walla, Washington. I'm just saying I have the confidence now to know I'm 23,000 words in, and I go along something and I might reread something for a little bit more information. Like, wait a minute, what did I say about this or that? And I realize I have something that's very clunky. I know just from writing it, this is clunky, but I have the confidence to say, don't worry about it. Keep going forward. And that, I think, is probably the biggest thing for me in my writing career at 49 years old, is just keep going. Fuck it. You'll get back to it. And that's really nice.
Yeah, that's the skill that I'm learning. And I know intellectually that that's the right approach. And I've given that advice to other people, right? Very cavalier. Oh, you just got to keep going, Yeah, man, just do it. It's so easy. And then on the inside, I'm like, you fool. It's not easy. It's this evil villain voice in the back of my head going, you'll never finish.
Exactly. And that's a bad voice to get through. So now, I'm aiming for 50,000 words, but I also know, I even feel we said it on here, somebody's quote that was like, don't care about the word count. When it's done, it's done. I think, I don't know, it might have been like Faulkner or something like that to make it sound smart.
I think enough people have said that we could attribute it to almost everyone. Abraham Lincoln once said.
Exactly. Yeah, if you've ever read The Penny Saver from Walla Walla, Washington, boy, I tell you, that guy, the head writer there. But I'm now starting to think about what patterns I'm creating in the 23,000, 24,000 words I've got, because I'm sort of quasi coming to my mid stage, the sort of patterns that help me realize what theme I'm working on.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that we'll kind of dig into it today, because I need to get at that and start to recognize, so I can not only have something that is, that people can read and say, oh, I get it, but also something that hopefully people can go back to and, dig through some layers of. Because I love Easter eggs. I love showing, we've talked about it before, being a Beastie Boys fan. I love being able to have things that people can go, oh, I know where he ripped this off from, as a sort of homage. But the theme, give it to me. Give it to me.
So, remember that kind of bleak, what did I call it? The bleakness that I texted you a couple weeks ago, felt like a thematic statement. And I remember that from school and whatnot. So it got me thinking about theme. And then, of course, you had mentioned it at the end of our last episode. And so I'm like, well, yeah, that's a good jumping off point. It's one of the competencies on the competency map. And it's one that I don't think too hard about in the drafting stage, but maybe we should. So I was thinking about, okay, what is it? Because, it's one of those words you throw around and you never really think about what it means. The theme of the story is blah, blah, blah. And well, what does theme mean? Well, it's the theme, it's what the theme is. Yeah. And so I was really struggling with it. So I did some research online. I just wanted to see if I could see patterns in the different examples or the different definitions. And so a lot of them said that it was the main idea or the underlying meaning that the writer explores. Another one was a central unifying idea. Another one called it the bigger issue that emerges as the characters pursue their goals. So basically the big idea, right? And it's not focused on character, plot, or action as much as it is about what is the story about, all caps. And so that can be tough to quantify sometimes, especially in stories that aren't fully formed. So I think, it's worth thinking about in the drafting process, and it's worth thinking about from a, starting with the end in mind. But I don't know that we need to obsess over it in the early stages,
Yeah, I am trying to sort of recognize what I like and how I'm definitely writing from a certain vantage point and at a point in my life where I'm dealing with my own shit, for lack of a better term. And so I'm trying to recognize what I can go back to and strengthen once I've kind of done the sprint and gotten the whole piece finished, that first draft. Once I've done that sprint, once I've got it all done, I can go back and say, okay, obviously I'm writing from a certain viewpoint. What is in here that is really, shouting out to me that I can strengthen? And maybe that's where my theme is coming from, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I think maybe I was jumping the gun a bit when I typed out the thematic statement, and I've written very little of the actual manuscript. But it was bugging me because I was imagining these scenes and they were all very dark and very depressing kind of scenery and action around what I'm looking at. So I'm like, well, maybe it's worthwhile just to kind of wring the mop out and try to see what all this stuff is. What is this mop water? And so I feel very good about that, but I don't think that I would recommend that anybody do that unless they felt like they had to. And I don't necessarily think that it's worthwhile to, having written this thematic statement on a work that doesn't exist yet, feel beholden to that as the only approach going forward. It's too early. You just don't know what the thing is until it's done. But what I plan to do is, the writer's point of view, any writer's point of view, is going to subconsciously put theme into a story. And, because you have a point of view. If you come into a story knowing this is the kind of story I want to write, And maybe it's happy or sad, or maybe it's pensive, or maybe it's based on something you experienced or a series of experiences that you have. When you describe those things in the action of the characters, the dialogue they speak, the way that you are describing setting, the words that you choose, all of that is like a mosaic. And each, scene or word or phrase or action or character detail is a stone in that mosaic. And it's only when the mosaic is completely laid that you can kind of step back and look at it and go, oh, the theme is this. And so my argument is, it's probably something I want to keep in mind as I go, because I think it'll make it easier when I step back to go, oh yeah, I was sort of intending this thing. Let me refine that and make sure that it comes through. And let me make sure I'm not being too on the nose, or, if I don't want it to sound like allegory, for example, like just scrub some of that stuff out. Or, oh, well, over here, it's sort of flat, but there's an opportunity to change this description or to change the location to better fit my thematic construction. So I'll change it from a grocery store to a cemetery, right? Because I'm trying to juxtapose light and dark or whatever. So those are the kinds of things that I find very valuable as a writer, to just have an understanding of the tone that you want to convey, because subconsciously you're going to place those breadcrumbs, those mosaic stones, they're going to be there whether you want them to be or not. And so that's how I approach it.
Yeah, and that's why I thought that the text that you sent me with those kind of things that you were thinking of was a really great idea, because it's kind of helping, like you said, if it's going to change, and I think being open to change is very important when you're writing a longer piece, because outlines are wonderful as a thing to begin, but you have to be open to the fact that something might come up in the writing that you're just like, wait a minute, I'm more excited about this, or oh, that's an unexpected turn of events. Why don't I explore that area? And so, yeah, I liked that the thematic elements that you were sort of sharing with me. And I have sort of thought about that. I just haven't put them down on paper. Well, in all honesty, I was taking the easy way out. I'm like, I'll just do a noir novel. Nobody has to have a theme in that. Just has to have a good ending where they're like, you're the killer because.
And maybe we're premature in having this conversation, but I like to think about it early, because very often that was the only thing I was looking for. As a younger man, the only thing I cared about was thematic statements and thematic resonance. I didn't care if the characters were any good. I wanted the writing to be really good. So the quality of the sentences and the thematic purpose of it, those are the things I wanted. Now it's different. I mean, I really want a good story now, and I prefer good characters because they are compelling and they're interesting. But one of the things, I forgot to tell you this, Tim, so long ago, I've always been like this. I must be hardwired like this. But when characters start to do things that are dumb, I have to look away. I have to avert my eyes. So if I'm watching it on film and someone is, doing something really stupid, which characters do, right? Like, that's a really good way to set up a character to fail so that later in the story they can kind of redeem themselves. But yeah, they're doing something completely dumb and I can't even watch. I've got to just look at my phone or look away. When I was 8 years old, I remember this vividly. There was a TV show on called Alice. I don't know if you remember Alice. Yeah, it was a sitcom that was kind of a spinoff of a movie. I think it was Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore was the movie. But anyway, it was starred Linda Lavin, and it was a funny show. Just a regular old sitcom. And there was a character on there named Vera, I think her name was, and she was the ditzy waitress, right? Ditzy friend. And so she would always do things that were just painfully dumb. And I remember I was sitting in front of the television, and I would actually move my head to be equal with the television so that my ear was equal with the TV, and I physically could not see the screen. So I was so uncomfortable with the stupid shit that Vera was doing, I had to move my head so that I literally couldn't see the television screen. So fast forward to now, it's hard for me to get my characters to do dumb things. And that's why for the longest time I was writing quote unquote perfect characters, people who didn't make a lot of mistakes, and they were super boring. So that's one of the reasons I'm excited to start drafting the novel, because I want to see these people fail and see if I can actually do that, because I think I can.
Yeah.
But I don't even know why I told you. Why was I telling you that? Like, I don't remember why I was telling you that.
Well, the same thing. Ricky Gervais is The Office, and David Brent.
Oh, yes.
Gervais.
Yes.
There were times where I had to stand up and walk away from the television because I was very much like, I can't watch that. I'm embarrassed for him. And of course, that character I find to be one of the most fascinating characters that I've seen on television, because obviously he was good at his job, and he was good enough at his job that a camera crew came to to film the business that he was sort of in charge of. And then once he gets the camera, that's when we see him. Anyway, I could talk about The Office all day, but I think mainly because I am dumb. I love writing from that perspective. One of the things that I'm very excited about with this novel that I'm working on is how would regular people get caught up in trying to solve a crime. The crime being a pretty big robbery that's happened at the Chess King, a chessboard store, whatever. And so, yeah, I'm actually finding out as I'm going along writing it that's where we get to see. People are always looking at sort of reality television shows, and I use reality television shows in quotes because they rarely are actually real. But we see people on TV make choices, and we're like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? When if we were in the same place making these kind of choices in these reality shows, we'd have 6 million viewers asking us, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? So I'm really having a lot of fun with the characters that I've developed, not knowing how to go about solving this crime. I have my main character who is taking charge of it to do it, but she has no experience. It's just something to get her out of the everyday, ordinary, humdrum life that she's in, and is something that she wanted to do when she was a kid. So I'm finding it very interesting to kind of like write from my own personal inexperience in solving crimes and finding out questions that I should have asked at the beginning. I can ask later because these characters don't know. It's really, really been really refreshing to have characters who aren't experienced try to experience something that you need a lot of experience for.
Yeah. I really think that your format is ideal for writing that kind of book, because your characters are searching for the truth, right? And so you can set up a circumstance without really knowing why it occurred. And then through the point of view of your characters doing the search, you are also searching. So you can either approach it from, I know exactly what happened, and I'm now sort of working backwards from that to make sure that it's fully planted. Or you could say, here's what happens. Let me pretend that I'm the person investigating, and let's see what I discover, So either way works. Which way are you approaching it?
I'm coming from the viewpoint of someone who wanted to really be a detective when they were young and saw all the movies and read all the books and was very fascinated by it. But the work of doing it, and maybe I'm talking about my own writing career, the sort of glitz and glamour of being, William Powell in The Thin Man, for example, or any of, the gumshoes like Mickey Spillane or anything like that, or even Sherlock Holmes, all of the glitz of these detectives who are able to solve things and are so smart at the end. But in real life, detective work isn't like that. And you do need a lot of experience, and it's not experience in the things that you get to see on television. There's a lot more that goes into it. So I think that I'm finding that this character is starting to understand there's a lot more to it, and that maybe this was the wrong choice to make because there's too much involved. I just had my main character just had a knife pulled on her by one of the bad people that can help her get to some truth. And so it's this kind of like, oh, I'm in way over my head. So she's experiencing and finding out how to do it as she's trying to do it. And that's been kind of fun. I hope that makes sense. I just wrote that part yesterday in front of a campfire, so I'm just a little bit like, it's still fresh.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Now that I know that somebody got a knife pulled on them, I want to read it even more. So send it along.
I've only got one murder and one knife pull, so we'll see what happens.
Okay. Well, I'll allow it. It's funny. I want to piggyback on something you mentioned earlier, the idea of the big idea that we were talking about earlier, and that you may or may not know exactly what that's going to be, but you kind of want to work towards it. I did have an article that I shared with you, and I'll put it in the show notes because I think it's a fantastic article that really talks about theme, and it gives 20 examples of thematic, statements or themes in literature. And it's I don't know if it's comprehensive, but it's pretty darn good. Stuff like
it's very good. Yeah.
You saw it. Yeah. The circle of life, coming of age, faith versus doubt, fate versus free will, things like that. And it has examples of which books sort of tackle those overarching themes. Again, I think, for folks listening out there, I just want to be super clear. If you come to the work with that idea, I think that's great. And if you come to the work not knowing what any of that is going to be and you discover it through writing, that's great too. Like, there's no one way to do this. And, if I use the writing statement that I put together, thematic statement that I had put together and sent to Tim, the bleakness, and use that to inform all of my scenes, I think that would come through. But it's important to recognize that theme is emergent. And there's also this thing that I was surprised to have this thought, but theme may actually be a co-creation of the writer and the reader. And what I mean by that is the reader brings to it their own experience and really through interpretation of your work decides what the theme is for themselves. And it's super weird that I can spend so much time trying to lay the breadcrumbs and lay out the stones of the mosaic to be this really nice pattern. And someone else comes over and goes, "It's a seahorse." And I'm like, "What do you mean a seahorse? Yeah. Jesus, how are you getting that?" "No, look, it's a seahorse." Right. So and in college, I remember being very frustrated that there were literary criticism books that would devote themselves to interpreting works from antiquity in using the filter or the lens of a system of thought that didn't exist at that time. The classic example in my mind is a Marxist reading of Shakespeare. And I remember seeing a book on that. I'm sure there are many, many books on that. And I'm like, why? Why would you do this? Like Karl Marx, I think he's at least 200 years before the guy was even born. Probably more. And I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. It wasn't a point of view that existed. Okay, I can go back in time and sort of look at it through this lens, but how does that help? I just don't get it. So there's a lot of what the reader brings to the table and the clarity of their vision. And so in some cases, I think writers might want to be very heavy-handed or very almost borderline didactic about their sort of thematic statements just to bang people over the head and make sure they get it. I think at that point, you run the risk of it being more allegory than anything else. A writer who is writing allegorically, right, where everything is symbolism, where you have a character named Faith and it's supposed to represent, faith in the world rather than just a woman named Faith. I just, you bring to that this sort of external sensibility of, let's look at a capitalist reading of this work that wouldn't have been around at the time of let's do a capitalist reading of Aristophanes. Like, why? What are we doing here? I think the theme has to emerge from the work, but there is this co-creation that comes along with it where the reader is bringing their own sensibility to it. So I don't know whether that makes the thematic statement more valid or less valid because it's got to be recognized, it's got to be picked up on by the reader in order for it to even have an impact.
Yeah, I think, I've never really run across that where someone's read my work and was like, "Oh, it's this and it means that." I've run across plenty of people try to walk up to David Lynch and say, "Oh, I loved Eraserhead. It was about this, this, and this." And he's like, no. And then he, of course, doesn't explain what it's about because that's the wonder of David Lynch. It is, from, my viewpoint on it is that it's something you're doing for yourself. Like, I want to write this novel because I've been on such a noir kick. I love, we've talked about all that stuff. I don't need to do it again. You can go back a couple episodes. As a matter of fact, go back several episodes, re-listen, share with your friends, tell your friends about the Tiffin In Writing Workshop, now available on Spotify or wherever you get your podcast from. But, I'm writing the book because I want to feel like, I feel like I want to put this out there. I'm like, I'm excited about this. I think I've got a decent story to make myself laugh and to hopefully make a couple of my friends that read it think, oh yeah, this is so Tim. But once it's out there, man, holy cow, you kind of gotta, you can either read the comments section or not read the comments section, because some, people are gonna read into it how they read into it, and you can't control that. So having that sort of thematic mantra or that idea is helpful, because I want to sort of go back, because obviously writing that first draft is so much fun, because you're like, and then this happens, but then this happens, and if that happens, then this has got to happen, blah, 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 da, 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 da. And, there are already things, 23,000 words into my own piece, there are already scenes when I go back looking for like, oh, what did I name that person? I go back and I'm like, oh, I forgot that I wrote that scene. Oh man, I already forgot this, I forgot that. So I think it's good to have a baseline, and remembering what that baseline is, I think is important to go back to. It shouldn't hinder your progress. But it's definitely something that it's like, it's that sort of well of like why you were sort of starting to create it in the beginning, because you have a certain vantage point to come from. So yeah, it's starting to emerge for me. And it's the thematic elements, and I'm really happy. And let me hold on a second. Easy there, easy. I'm hoping it remains the same, because if my theme sort of changes by what I write in the rest of this novel, that's going to be a lot of work, and I really don't want to do that.
Yeah, no, I understand. But in a way, it's the subconscious answering the question: why these people? Why this situation? Why this modality, why this story, and so if you understand that as a writer, sort of what compels you about it. And I think this is where, if you come to a story only trying to follow the recipe of a plot template, for example, and you're like, oh, I need to insert action here, and oh, I need conflict here in this scene, and it's all cookie cutter or color by numbers, then you may lose that thematic thread, because usually when you are compelled to write about certain characters, you find them interesting, and you may find them incredibly compelling, and there's a reason for that. So even if you're not aware of it, you are subconsciously aware of it, and there's a reason you're focusing on these people so much.
Yeah.
And, I like to think, look, without getting too heavy into the psychoanalysis, I think we're working out our own problems in the work, not you and me, but just writers in general. Like I'm pretty sure Stephen King told a story about him needing to get his car fixed. I think he had a pickup truck and he needed to get it fixed. So he drove up to this like mountain, because he lives out in the middle of nowhere. But he drove up to this guy's house to get his car fixed, and the guy had this enormous dog that scared the crap out of him. And he said, so I went home and I wrote Cujo. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, cool. So clearly he identified with something that he found compelling, and then he put it into a book. And Stephen King's a good example, because he writes so prolifically and is of the opinion that he's doing, 3,000 words a day, or it's not happening. I always thought that was absurd when I was younger, because I think I misinterpreted that as 3,000 keepable words. But I think he's just blasting out as much as he can, and he'll go back and keep the good stuff and throw away the stuff that's no good. So, like, why do it? Yeah, the writer needs to express an opinion or a point of view of something about the human condition, and or they convey a message or a lesson to the reader. Like, one of those two things is going to happen.
Yeah. That son of a bitch. Stephen King.
Well, that's a great point. Let's pause for a second. Stephen King seems to have a point of view where he just expresses things that scare the shit out of people. Like, that's why he writes. Yeah. And I don't know what it is about his past. I don't know his personal history. But I think if I did know his personal history more intimately, I might be able to say, oh, this is the root cause of that. You know, and he cultivated this ability to write and has been very successful doing it. But like, this is where it came from. So I'm not recommending that we all go psychoanalyze ourselves to figure out the root cause, because I'm of the opinion that if I dig deep enough and find the reason, it'll be solved and I won't write anything. So I don't want that to happen, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm not suggesting that.
Yeah, I think there's a little magic that's been lost, and I'll only say it this way, and I hope this makes sense as to what we're talking about at this very moment. But like, I just recently saw a post from The Hives, which is my favorite band of the moment. They have a really wonderful new record out. They're touring. Their suits are glow in the dark. They're wonderful. But nice. They just released a post that within the middle of it, they're the kind of band, if you don't know The Hives, they're the kind of band that very much play we're a rock and roll band. We're snotty. We're punk. We're better than you. We're better than everyone else. We're the greatest band in the world. But within one of the posts that they just put on Instagram, they mention, like that time we saw the documentary on how they made Jurassic Park before seeing Jurassic Park, which kind of ruined it for us. And I thought, yeah, that does suck these days. These days where we get this. You know, you see an episode of Star Trek or Game of Thrones or anything that's a sort of escapist fantasy, but then right after they have like, you know, into the episode this week and how the actor has dealt with such an emotional scene. And it's like, I don't want to see that stuff, you know? It's interesting. I don't want to read Stephen King's biography or autobiography before I read Cujo, you know?
Yeah.
Just so that I can kind of have that little bit of fantasy left, I guess.
Yeah. It's like I agree completely, because I feel that way about trailers that give away the whole story. Like, why do I want to watch this now? You told me the entire story in 3 minutes. So how good is your story if I got the whole thing in 3 minutes?
Well, and it also sort of translates into one of the things that I'm also trying to do lately in my writing. I make no bones about it. I think we've discussed it here before. I was definitely in my 20s one of those male writers who introduced female characters by their breast size. No. I was that guy. And so one of the most important things that happened to me, I don't know if you remember him, but do you remember in college a guy named Sean Kelly? I worked with him at the Superstore.
Yeah, I do.
Well, Sean Kelly and I went to a bookstore because he was looking for a very specific book at the time. And this is early mid-90s. And he found the book, but the book was being made into a movie. And so the book cover had whatever, I don't remember the book, what it was, but it had the actor and the actress that were in the film on the cover. And he was like, you know what? I really hate this. It really ruins the book for me when they put who should be in my head as these characters. He liked to have the book so he could explore his own imagination and cast, for example, for lack of a better term, cast the book the way that he wanted to. And so that, and my understanding that maybe I should try a different way of explaining how women are, it just started to realize where I think those are very early elements for me now, to where I try very little to explain the characters and how they look and what they look like. Because I really would love to have the reader be able to cast the book with whoever they want. And I've been extremely minimal about my characters. I've only said like one of them is like a giant, a grocery cart attendant, or person. I don't know what the technical terminology would be for it, because I've had to explain that they're very, very big. But the only thing that I've said about my main character is that she puts her hands in her pockets a lot. That's it. And I'm trying to see what I can get away with, how little I can get away with in that respect. I
think you're right. People will fill in the blanks because you have to have some kind of mental image in order to just recognize this is Charlotte and this is, Tiffany or whatever. So you have to have some kind of differentiation. And if you're hanging the only differentiator is the fact that this one puts their hands in their pocket, then that calls out the significance of that. And that might actually be a symbol that you would use as part of your theme. Like so for example, if a character is constantly hiding their hands, whether they're in their pockets or whether they're behind a table, or like, it doesn't even matter if they're consciously doing it. If you're planting the seeds that this character does not want their hands to be shown, what does that mean? What's the significance of that? And if you do it often enough, people will pick up on it and go, why is this always the way this character is described? What larger significance does that have? So I think it's very clever. As a writer, how do you create these themes in your work? And I think we kind of danced around it a little bit. There's like two main ways you can do it. You can either decide on the theme and you can plant it, like rows of corn, and hope that they pick it up. You're leaving clues. And I think that's a perfectly good way in a noir book. You're already leaving clues. So like that's one way to do it. The other one is more, I like to call it cold, focusing on the action. You just write the story and then you kind of take a look at the narrative after the fact and see if stuff pops up. Like, why am I using green all the time? Oh, geez. All right. Well, let me see if I can. There's a really good example of F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, right? Green is a central motif, and a motif is just a collection of symbols, right? So an individual symbol like the green light that's on the dock, next to Daisy's house, and and so just as a recap, Gatsby buys a house across the bay, and he's basically looking across the bay at Daisy's house, pining for her, trying to figure out how he's going to win her back, because he was a poor schlub back in the day, and now he's a rich bootlegger, so he's trying to figure that out. And so at different times, green is a color that is used with some significance. And when you read through the whole book, see all of the actions, and take a step back and think about it, green has this sort of disgust feel to it, but it's also about money and about greed. So it has a lot going on that you wouldn't notice just from the one light. And I remember as a kid, when we were forced to read the book in high school, and they're like, oh, yes, the significance of the green light. I only saw the one symbol. So I'm like, why? Like, you guys are idiots. Like, it's just green. It's just a green light. Like, how is this thing so significant? And it took me until I was in graduate school and read it probably the third time and had a better understanding of how collections of symbols form motifs, and that motif kind of gives you, it's a wink and a nudge in the ribs from the writer of, see, green, see. And I'm like, oh, all right, I get it. He's making a commentary on the downfall of American greed, or how the state of the country is because of the way that it's so materialistic and how that is ultimately bad. Okay, I get it.
Yeah. Just yesterday, again, I had my usual day where I kind of wrote 1,000 words, but I was so excited about where I was, again, because I'm in that part of the cycle where I'm like, I can get back. I can't wait to get back because I know what's coming next. Wait until next week when I don't know where I'm going next. But I hit upon a detail that just sort of came randomly, where my main character in this noir film is going to enlist help from the mall's bad person, the one who works outside the lines of the law. And they happen to be an attendant at the sneaker shop in this mall. Do the Running Man is what the sneaker shop is so far called. But she goes in and, down the long corridor, that sort of main corridor of the sneaker shop, sneakers to the right, sneakers to the left, racks of clothes. At the end, behind the register, is the wall of hats. And we've all seen this, where there's a giant wall of hats in like a Dick's Sporting Goods, in a, whatever, at, Foot Locker, wherever they are, there's always hats. And so I had the character kind of like look at it in all of this sort of this collection of colors and try to unfocus her eyes on purpose to see if there was like a pattern that she could make or a picture that she could see. Cool. with all of these colors, but she can't see it. And then I was like, oh, and who knows, this might not make it into the final, work that I would present to people. But I was like, oh, maybe that's, if she's trying to solve a crime, she's looking for patterns. She's looking for pictures, and she doesn't see it in this wall when she tries to unfocus her eyes because, so I was like, that's a weird detail that just came out because I explored the space of the environment of the novel that I'm working on, and sort of was like, oh, let's keep on, let's put a pin in that, and maybe I'll come back to it and see if I can. And so from that point, it seems like if that's going to be a thematic element of trying to see the patterns and unable to do so, trying to, or just a nice little detail to have, it's sort of like, oh, I found that. I want to try and be on the lookout where I could put it next, but not shoehorn it in.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. And I think those are opportunities where if we have this really strange moment where a character doesn't need to do anything, right? That this isn't part of the plot. This isn't a character motivation. This is a detail where you really pause the forward narrative and go, she tries to see a pattern in this wall of hats, which I think is fantastic. And if you did not do anything with that, if that weren't a symbol that could play into a larger motif that could speak to the theme, then it would be not only a wasted opportunity, but it would actually form a distraction for the reader. You've got this weird pause where you're like, look at this, look at this cool silver thing. Oh, okay. So he must be doing something with silver. Nope. It's just cool. And then you move on with, that's so terrible. So,
yeah.
So
you just described every single story I wrote in college.
And they were so terrible. Look,
it's no wonder I took a 20-year pause from writing things.
I think we've all been there, and I hope to not be there soon. But I definitely think that's where the intentionality of the author matters. That if you've got cool things that occur that aren't necessarily plot or action, but they're bits of character, and even just high-quality writing or really interesting imagery, if they don't tie together into something, then it is a wasted opportunity, and it could actually be something that reduces the overall quality of the work because it's just glaringly obvious that you're just, looking around instead of helping to kind of focus my eyes as a reader on things that are of a larger importance. It really, it undercuts the effectiveness of the narrative because it showcases that there is no larger significance to the work. It's just people walking around saying stuff. And I think that's the real problem. So we need theme. We need it. Even if we don't want it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's weird. I think I've got a good handle on theme. I think I really feel like I do. I get so nervous, Art. I really do. That I'm thinking about it too much. And it's that struggle of everything that I've done wrong to myself in trying to write. And trying to fight against that and be like, look, man, just have fun. And it's tough. It's tough when you're just like, here's the thematic element. Okay, so to make this work, I need to do this, this, and this. And I'm just like, dude, you've got to calm down.
Yeah.
And I think the other way is dangerous for me too, because then it's like, nope, I need to work against that. So I'm going to put in something, and then I just try and put in something that doesn't make any sense because I'm working against what I used to do. So it's the struggle, man.
I think if you just focus on what you find interesting, whether it's a quirky kind of interesting or something that really you'd want to look at with a microscope, whichever, right? But what is the most interesting thing happening right now? And don't worry about theme and, any of this crap, really, in that first draft. You're in that luxurious space where you just need to go and just keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And it's only when you come back, and again, that's why it's probably a little premature for us to be talking about it in our own process. But I think because we're tracking through all 10 of the competencies on the competency map, it makes sense to talk about it now. But this is really more of an editing cycle thing. Because I do think that when you draft it and because I've experienced this in short fiction because I've never written a novel, but in short works, I can draft it out in a pretty short period of time and then I let it sit for a couple of weeks and I come back to it as a dispassionate reader, as a person who hasn't written it. And I read it and my response usually is, oh shit, this is a lot better than I thought it was. But then you can look at it with these clear eyes and go, oh, well, this isn't good or this needs to change. But also, if you come to it with that lens of what is the theme of this work, you'll start to pick up on phrases you've used or descriptions that you've lingered on and go, why did I pause so much right there? Why did I use this word? Why do I always use, why am I juxtaposing white and blue all the time? Like, what the heck is going on here? And those are the things that you can then explore in the editing process. But I think you're right. If you are focused on that in the initial draft, you're thinking about the wrong stuff, because you don't have enough control at that point. You know? Yeah.
But that's very, very true. Yeah. So I just like thinking of it. The baselines, a mantra, something. I'm not even really sure I'm using the word mantra right. But I mean, just something that you can come back to. I think that helps. It's like, I wanted to start this novel because I wanted to say something about this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, I think it is very early to talk about, but also not too early. I think it's good to at least have an idea of where you want to head towards. I don't know. It's great. I don't know. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if you have an idea of where you want to go, you'll get there a lot faster than if you don't know where you want to go.
Right.